Let me introduce myself to you. I'm Kenneth Holtz, and I know that I have done some training with some of you several years back. A little bit about myself. Probably the best way to describe what I have done for the last 35 years is I'm an educator, and I wear a lot of different hats as an educator. I'm a certified school counselor, so I've always been a part of a school. I was a part of Woodward Academy in Atlanta, Georgia. I was a part of LaGrange College in the Counseling Career Development Office for a number of years, and now I'm part of the Brookstone School in Columbus. Also, I am a licensed professional counselor, so I have had a small private practice where I work with families and individuals. I also provide EAP for Troup County through the Pastoral Institute. So I've also been a family therapist counselor for the entirety of my career as an educator. And then I also have had the opportunity, the privilege really, of doing training with companies and schools and hospitals for the last 25 years. And it's something that I enjoy immensely. So I appreciate you inviting me to do this with you this morning. I hope this is something that is worthwhile to you. I don't know if you have attended a training on harassment in a while, but I know a lot of times people that are asked to come to a training on harassment seeing it as we have to be here, we have to go through it. And there's a certain amount of that is true, but also I want you to get something out of this that can be valuable to you, so that it's not just you sitting here an hour going through the motions. I want to start with the fact that there are many states that require yearly training in harassment. Georgia is not one of those. Georgia, it is highly recommended that you do it, but it is not required. I think this is something that Troup County is going to begin to focus on a little bit more, simply because of what is going on in the world today. And I think that it's something that we all have to pay attention to. You will see me say, and you'll see on slides several times, that this is policy, this is the law, but I think that this shouldn't be presented in a way that is fear-based. Don't do this because you are going to get in trouble. While that is the case, I think that we should present this whole idea of harassment in a way that says we don't harass because we are a culture of kindness and respect. It's not because I'm going to get in trouble. It's because as a county, as an organization, we do these things because they are the right things to do. And we are trying to create that culture again of kindness and respect among one another, as well as we want to be a place where people want to work. It is seen as a destination. Troup County is known as a place where people treat one another with respect, where there is an environment of kindness. So I want to approach it from the fact, again, repeating myself, yes, it's against the law. You can be held accountable legally for some of these things. But that's not the primary reason that we do these things. We do these things because it's the right thing. Okay? I thought I'd start with, if you've taken a look at this by any chance. And of course, these are just 15 statements. The answers obviously are on the back. Kind of a pretest, see where you are. And we're not going to go over these one by one, but as you take a look at these, and again, I don't expect you to answer them true, false right now unless you want to. As you look at these, are there any that don't make sense to you? Are there any that are not clear? Like, wow, I didn't realize that. Number 9, for example. If no one complains about your behavior, that means you're not offending anyone. That is absolutely false, right? If you look on the back, employers are responsible for ensuring they provide a work environment free of harassment. Thus, they may be liable for harassment by non-employees. Again, that liable there. So, as you look at these, kind of judge for yourself how well informed you are when it comes to harassment in the workplace. Okay? I have here the policy of Troup County to ensure equal employment opportunity without discrimination or harassment on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, age, national origin, disability, or any other characteristic protected by law. Troup County prohibits and will not tolerate any such discrimination or harassment. Now, the difficulty with these statements are that we have seen them so often that sometimes it goes in one ear and out the other. But I think this morning we have an opportunity to take a few minutes and actually look at that and say, okay, let's see what we say we do. And then, do we do it? And I want to say again, I am not here making any assumptions. I'm not here making any accusations. I'm not here thinking that the reason we're doing this is because we have a problem in Troup County. That's not it at all. This is to make sure that we're all on the same page. Now, the other thing I think I have to mention as we're starting this, I realize that I'm getting ready to talk about harassment, part of which is sexual harassment, as a male. And I have to be aware of the fact that my perceptions are through the filter of being a male. So for those of you who are female in this audience, I'm well aware of the fact that no matter how open-minded I am coming from a male perspective. And I think if a female were presented this, she would have to say the same thing as well. Because harassment is not just male on female. Harassment is male on male. Harassment is, as you will see, harassing people for their culture, their religion, their gender, their age. So I'm aware of the fact that I am a male presenting this, no matter how unbiased that I try to be. I'm aware of the fact that it's coming through that filter. So here's your policy. Now, I also left my remote, so I have to come back up here. This is also taken from your policy. Sexual harassment. Again, let's make it clear. It is illegal under federal law and constitutes unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. Other harassment. Verbal or physical conduct that denigrates or shows hostility or aversion towards an individual because of his or her race, color, sex, sexual orientation, religion, national origin, age, disability, or any other characteristic protected by law. Right? But again, we want to do this because we are creating a culture of kindness and respect among one another. Take a look at these. Appropriate or inappropriate? Inappropriate. Is it pretty obvious? Yeah. Why is it inappropriate? It's unwelcome. Obviously, he is invading her personal space. Right? That's pretty obvious. Harassment? Yes. Hard to tell, isn't it? It's hard to, and here's the thing, and you're going to hear me say this a number of times about harassment. There's a lot of gray areas. There's a lot of gray areas. Because what I find offensive and what you find offensive may be two different things. But you will see me say in a minute, it doesn't matter if I find it offensive or not. It's the person that it is happening to if they find it. We have to take a look at, this is the counselor in me coming out. How were we raised? What was the environment we were raised in? And unfortunately, many times the environment we were raised in, things that we consider normal, natural, okay, are not. And we have to pay attention to that. So this is kind of tough. It's like, is this harassment? Well, it all depends. What's it depend on? Huh? Context. Now I'm looking at her face. Does she look happy? No. Now it could be, well, what's that?
She could be thinking, he said, you my number one employee.
Right? But I'm looking at that as, this, to me, I'm assuming, assumption, this person might be a leader. This might be the person she answers to, right? Maybe. And as a leader, and I know a number of you are in positions of leadership, is this ever a good posture to assume? But how often do people in positions of leadership assume this posture? That goes back to, I think we did leadership training several years ago, the difference between a leader and a boss. Leaders are aware, they pay attention, they do everything they possibly can to keep harassment down or non-existent in their organization or on their team. So I don't think a leader would ever assume this position and have someone that answers to them with their head down with that sort of look. What about this? Is that harassment? Now remember, and you're going to see this is very interesting. There's harassment in what is called quid pro quo, and there's harassment that is a hostile work environment. And they're very similar, but one includes more of harassment because of gender, sexual identity, race, culture. Right? Is this harassment? Is it? Look at the look on her face and look at them. Does that look like harassment?
Yes.
What do you think's going on?
They're talking about
They're talking about, does she feel good about it?
no.
Okay. You're also going to see, can harassment be a one-time incident, or does it have to be over time? It can be a one-time incident, right? Harassment? Are they leering at her? I know it's hard, and that's why I put pictures up here. It's like, I don't know. Does she look comfortable? Huh? I don't know. You'll see in a minute. We've really got to think about it. We've got to be aware. Harassment? Are they talking about him, laughing at him? And again, because so often, what do we think? When we think of harassment, particularly sexual harassment, we think of who committing it against who? Males committing harassment against females. And absolutely that happens a lot. But there are other forms of harassment that we've got to be aware of. Harassment. Now, let me ask you something. Can we be honest? Can we be honest? Now, here's the deal. Listen to this. It is so funny about sex roles and about hormones and everything else. We think, well, hey, that guy ought to be liking that girl hanging all over him. Because he's a male, and don't males like female attention? Not necessarily, right? Not necessarily. Is that harassment? Absolutely. All right? I was just joking. I was just playing around. We were all just joking about this. And what you have to understand, it's not just a joke, it is harassment. You have to understand, so you're going to see me say this again in a minute. So often in the workplace, we do things just like children. You know how often working with children, when a child hurts another child's feeling, the child who was the aggressor, the child who was, what do they say as their excuse? I was just joking. I was just joking. Well, you may think it was a joke, but that person who has been offended, that person who has been hurt, that person who has been denigrated, it's not a joke. So the defense of, it's just a joke. We were just playing around.
is usually not, and I say usually not because you'll see again in a minute, there may be an exception to the rule. It's usually not a good excuse.
Let's take a look at some statistics, and again, I could put up 15 slides with statistics, but I want to put up a few. It's common, but here's the deal, it's rarely reported. No matter how much you see in the news now with the Harvey Weinsteins and the Jeffrey Epsteins and the various high-profile sexual harassment and harassment cases, statistics say that harassment is common and rarely reported. Again, not going to read every one of these. I want you to take a look at them though. It's expensive to an organization. 1 in 7 women, 1 in 17 men have sought a new job assignment, changed jobs, or quit a job because of sexual harassment and assault. Every time you have an employee leave a job, does it cost the organization money? Yes, because you got to train those people up. So we want to retain good people. Well, one way we retain good people is we are known as a culture of respect and kindness and professionalism. In some industries, more than 9 in 10 women say they've been sexually harassed. What would you think one of those industries might be? Just, what's that?
Construction.
Construction might be. There's an example in a minute on construction. How about the hospitality industry, waitresses and waiters? Right? Absolutely. There's that. There again is a telling statistic. Over 85% of people who experience sexual harassment never file a formal legal charge, and approximately 70% of employees never even complain. That tells me it's happening a lot. Again, let me say, I would never stand here in front of you and make accusations about your organization. That's not it at all. We're just simply pointing out the statistics, and this is what the statistics say. Given these statistics, given the examples we just looked at in pictures, how can we try to clear up some of these gray areas? How can we try to clear up what is lewd behavior? What is inappropriate behavior? What is, because, in my eyes, as I said a minute ago, this may not be lewd or inappropriate. In your eyes it is. Well, here's some things that that will help. It's not going to definitively make the answer, but here's some things we can ask ourselves these questions prior to behaving in a certain way. Is there equal power between me and the person I'm interacting with? If you are a supervisor, if you are a manager, if you are a lead, you got to be careful right now, because there is not equal power between you and that person you are interacting with. I don't mean that you have to spend every day being paranoid about every word you say and every move you make, but you got to be aware. Particularly, again, in a position of leadership. There's a saying that says the first chapter in the book of leadership is awareness. All leaders, the first thing you have to do is you got to be aware. You got to pay attention. I would take that further and say all of us in general have to be aware. We have to pay attention. Ask yourself, is there equal initiation and participation between me and the person I'm interacting with? What does that mean? Equal initiation and participation. Is the other person willingly, have they given me their permission? Are they willingly engaged in this conversation, in this relationship with you? Because if they are willingly, is that harassment? No. Ask yourself that question. Would I behave the same way if the person I'm in a relationship with were standing next to me? Would I say what I just said? Would I behave in a way that if the person I was in a relationship, if my wife were standing here right now, would I say what I just said to this woman or this man? Would I have these things in my office on display if my wife or my husband or the person I'm in a relationship were standing here and could see those? And if the answer is no, I absolutely would not, then don't do it. Would I want someone else to act this way toward a person who I'm in a relationship with? Would I want someone saying the thing that I just said? Would I want someone behaving in a way that I just behaved? Would I want someone having things displayed in my office toward a person I'm in a relationship with? Would I want my wife treated this way? Would I want my husband treated this way? Would I want my daughters? Would I want my son treated this way? And if the answer is no, I would not, then is the behavior okay? Absolutely not. Would I want this broadcast publicly? Would I want other people to know that I said or behaved in a certain way? And if the answer is yeah, not a problem. Because there was nothing unethical about this. There was nothing disrespectful about this. But if there's a question, I really wouldn't want other people to know that I just behaved this way. If I examine and acknowledge my sexual stereotypes, what does that mean? Have any idea? What's that mean? You're nodding. What does that mean? Have I examined and acknowledged my sexual stereotypes?
Biases.
Biases against who?
Everybody.
Particularly,
Anybody different.
what's that? Opposite sex and LGBTQ. Now, here's the weird thing today, and correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I told you, even though I have the opportunity to stand in front of you, simply because I say it does not mean it's true. My perception, unfortunately, when we say LGBTQ, automatically it gets politicized. Am I right? Or not? Huh?
Fox News nowadays.
I'm just saying, regardless of which way, it gets politicized. A certain group of people think this is okay, a certain group of people think it's not okay. You can have your opinions, you can have your beliefs, you can have your religious beliefs. No one says that you can't have those things. But in the workplace, you are not allowed to harass or discriminate against people who are not like you when it comes to their sexual orientation. Not allowed. Plus, if we're trying to create an atmosphere of trust, respect, and kindness, I'm going to treat everybody with respect and kindness and create this atmosphere of trust. I have examined, there's that awareness again. I paid attention. I'm aware of. And I don't just join in when other people begin to act in a disrespectful manner. Make sense? So I got to be aware. Now, here comes reading the slide again. Two types of sexual harassment. Quid pro quo. You've heard quid pro quo, right? And it applies in many different areas, but in terms of sexual harassment, it is something for something. I will provide you with, and usually this is from a person in a position of leadership or authority to a person who answers to them. If you do this, I will do this. If you don't do this, I will do this. Does this happen? Again, I'm not saying that it happens necessarily in your organization, but according to the statistics I just put up, does this happen quite often? Yes, it does. I mean, again, I hate to keep going back to the word awareness, but I'm going to keep saying it. We have to pay attention. So that's quid pro quo. Then we also have described as a hostile work environment. Well, these things are so closely related, right? Because obviously someone who has been said, I will do this for you if you do me this sexual favor. I will take this away from you if you don't do me this sexual favor. That's also a hostile work environment. But a hostile work environment, it does focus on the sexuality of another person, his or her gender, or sexual harassment. But the behaviors are unwanted, unwelcome. They're severe or pervasive enough to affect the person's work performance and or environment. Let me give you an example. In my counseling practice, I am working with someone who is the chief compliance officer for a pretty big company in Columbus.
he has to deal with, she just happens to be female. He has to deal with someone who is making his life miserable. It's not in a sexual nature, but it's just in questioning everything he has to say. Going to their superior and saying, these are things that he's doing that are unnecessary. She is creating a what? A hostile work environment. It's not of a sexual nature, although a hostile work environment could be of a sexual nature. She is harassing him. And it's not like he's some weak victim. He's simply doing his job. But in simply doing his job and making tough decisions and saying these are things we have to do, she is being a thorn in his side over and over and over, to the point that he's ready to leave a pretty high-paying position.
So what was your suggestion to him?
My suggestion to him was speak to her. Right? Speak to her. And in a respectful manner, not in an I'm so angry manner. You speak to her and say, first of all, and again, this has to be in a respectful, I don't answer to you. I don't answer. We need to work together for the betterment of this company.
Would you put them on notice with a letter, or would you personally go speak to them? Because if you're in that room with them, it's just you and them alone.
Well, you're right. Thank you. I have told him, document. Document with other people who are in your department, in compliance. Document, and thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it. Because we always need to document, particularly in today's world, as you well know, in human resources, about document. So every conversation he has with her, document. Here's what was talked about, here's the date, here's what we decided. And then, of course, bottom line is, if you finally get to a point where you say, I run a cost-benefit analysis in my head, I like the benefits of this job, I like my pay, but it's costing me this. So you get to a point in your professional life where you have to say, I can no longer stay here. Or I can stay here and put up with this. Make sense?
No, because why would he have to put up with it?
If he wants the job. If once he has documented, once he has taken it to their supervisor, their leader, and nothing is being done. And unfortunately that happens. So that's the thing that is so frustrating for people who report. You're going to see again in a minute. I report, I tell you what's going on. I'm going by the policy. I'm going by what is stated in our handbook. I have reported this to you, and yet nothing is being done.
So at what point does it become, it's obviously discrimination, but at what point does that person have, it's going to be held liable?
Well, at that point, that's when you're talking about the individual I'm talking about. At that point, that's when you decide, do I seek legal representation? Do I make a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, right? Or do I want to take it that far? That's that cost-benefit analysis. But ideally, that's how we start with the policy. Ideally, if a company says this is what we do and this is how we do it, they will do it. So ideally, if he speaks to her in a straightforward and respectful manner and nothing changes, then he takes it where? He can take it to his supervisor. If nothing happens at that point, he can go to HR, right? If nothing happens at that point, then he has options, okay? You don't want to get to that point, though. You want an organization that says, here's what we do, and we do it. So ideally, again, he speaks to her, and she goes, oh, I'm aware of it. I'm sorry. I apologize. I won't do it again.
But it takes a counselor to tell him to go to her?
The reason that I am working with him is the anxiety that is produced by his work situation. Thank you for asking that. Because it is truly such an anxiety-producing position. No, he does not need me to tell him what to do. That's an excellent point as well, right? So again, we're talking about the whole reason we do this is, if this is our policy, if this is how we do things, let's do it. Let's do it. But unfortunately, that's why sometimes people have to seek legal representation outside of the workplace.
Has he gone to leadership for support?
He has, and the thing about it is, in his perception, the person that he answers to and that she answers to is not addressing his issues, is not addressing his concerns.
What about bringing outside in, whether it's equal opportunity advisor?
Well, that's where he could do that, but what he is trying to decide right now is, do I want to stay in this job or not? That's where he is. So he's at the point where he says, if this continues and it ramps up my anxiety so, then I will change jobs. He has options where he can change jobs. All right? So,
But if we teach that this should continue, why should he allow that to continue?
tell me again what you mean.
Because we teach people that you shouldn't put up with this, but here's this guy putting up with it, and if he doesn't do anything about it, then he's just part of that.
He has gone to his supervisor. He has gone to, nothing's happening. That's where his anxiety is ramped up. That's why he's at a point now where he's trying to say, what's my next move? And rather than say, I want to seek out legal representation, I want to go with, his choices are right now, do I quit and change employment? He's got to decide that for himself. I certainly don't tell him what to do. Right?
Then that situation's there for the next individual.
What's that?
Then that, if he does.
Absolutely,
that, then
but
that
you have to,
situation's for the
this
next-
is what is frustrating to me, and because I don't come, when I work with businesses, I don't come from a business background. And I'm amazed at the fact, the number of businesses that still have people in positions of leadership who don't do a good job of being a leader, right? I mean, again, I would say a good leader would, if a person who answers to me comes to me with a concern, and they state that concern in a respectful manner, and they have documentation, and I don't do anything, then that's not good leadership. And yes, you create a culture of nothing happens. And that's not a good place to be. Now, do I obviously have any control over what goes on in his company? Absolutely not. All we can do is talk about his options, what he has available to him. But unfortunately, again, this happens a lot. A lot. Quid pro quo. You do this for me, I'll do that for you. Obviously, examples of sexual harassment. Now, again, the problem here, unwelcome. Well, I've got to define what is unwelcome. Well, I go back to those questions that I ask myself. Lewd gesture. Well, I think we have an idea of what a lewd gesture is, but when we go from the ridiculously lewd gestures to, is this lewd or not? I've got to ask myself questions. There are some areas that we cannot define definitively what these things are. Because again, there are those gray areas. That's why we go back to, I've got to pay attention to my behavior and ask myself, is this respectful or disrespectful? Would this be something I would want broadcast publicly? Is this something I would do if my significant other was standing here beside me? Offensive objects or images. Well, guess what? What may be offensive to me is not offensive to you, but it doesn't matter whether it's offensive, whether it's offensive to the person this is happening to. More statistics, more facts. Does not have to be intentional. That's where we have to pay attention. I may not even be aware, and this is the scary part. I have to think. I have to pay attention. I have to be aware. I didn't intentionally say anything. And unfortunately, the other person found it offensive.
So prior to a behavior, prior to saying something, prior to joining in, I've got to pay attention and ask myself, is this something that is going to be offensive to the other person, male or female? Am I creating that hostile work environment, or would this be considered sexual harassment? Obvious things, but you have to talk about them. Hostile work environment certainly includes all of the sexual innuendo and things of a sexual nature, but also it's using slurs and insensitive terms. If I'm talking about someone of a different age, if I'm talking about someone of a different culture, obviously if I'm talking about the other gender, but it's more than just sexual when we're creating a hostile work environment. This is interesting. And I use the example, I think you said a minute ago, in the construction field, right? There's nothing sexual about this. But if, for example, if you are the only woman working in an all-male, or vice versa, but in this particular example, it happens to be a woman, and you are the only one whose tools are frequently hidden by your male coworkers, there's nothing sexual about that. But is it harassment? And I think the disturbing thing is, so often as a group, whoever I identify with, whether it's a group of males or whatever your particular group, we think it's just a what? It's just a joke. We were just being funny. Come on, get over it. Where's your sense of humor? Is it funny to that one person who's being left out, who's being harassed, who is being made fun of? No. Touch on this again. Stating or implying a negative manner that an employee is a gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or gender non-conforming. Making jokes about gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or gender non-conforming individuals. And to tell you the truth, I know it gets confusing, particularly the non-gender conforming people. Are you familiar with people who now want to be referred to as they and them? The pronouns. Familiar with that? Yeah. And I know that when I say that, I want you to pay attention right now. When I said someone who wants to be referred to as they or them, is your visceral reaction when I say that to be like, how weird. That's just stupid. And it might be, and you may have that feeling. But guess what? There are those people out there for whatever reason that want to be referred to. And I know it sounds silly to so many of us, and we may not understand it. Gosh, even as a counselor sometimes when I'm working with people with gender identity issues, and it's sometimes confusing to me. But it's not my place to sit in judgment of them. I can have my beliefs, I can have my religious beliefs about things, but again, I'm not allowed to express those, particularly in a harassing way in the workplace. I would hope, again, because we're talking about being good people and doing the right thing, that you wouldn't do this even outside of the workplace. Certainly, again, for the third time, have your beliefs, have your ideas, but it's not okay to harass other people. It's not okay to make other people feel uncomfortable intentionally. Now, from your policy again, Troup County strongly urges the reporting of all incidents of discrimination, harassment, or retaliation, regardless of the offender's identity or position. And we'll talk about this more. Let me move on here. We must have zero tolerance for harassment, sexual or otherwise, even if the perpetrator is somebody we like or admire. Does that happen?
And when it is somebody we like or admire, we're going to be less likely to what? Report it. And if that person gets reported, we have this desire to retaliate against the person who has reported. But it's the policy of Troup County to harass that retaliation is not tolerated. This is interesting, and tell me if this has been your observation. A minute ago, I mentioned so often, even as we grow as adults, that many times we still act like children. Bullies, right? People who harass, people who make fun of, people who think that their behavior is untouchable. Bullies thrive wherever authority is weak. And this is interesting. This is an observation. And you tell me again if this sounds true. Unfortunately, the workplace is many times like a middle school. They're the bullies, the victims, and the bystanders. Would you agree? How many of you know somebody who is a bully? Yeah. That you know they're untouchable. And you really don't want to be around them, but you're afraid that if you ever stand up to them, that the bully might turn their attention on who? On you. Right? So, too often the victims will not speak out, as evidenced by the statistics a minute ago. The victims don't speak out. In middle school, when you're working with children, the last people to know are the principals, right? Are the teachers. This child is being bullied. This child is being bullied. But the victims doesn't speak out. The bystanders, who are the bystanders? Other kids. In terms of us, who are the bystanders? The people who are aware of what is going on. We're aware. We see what's going on. And yet, we remain passive. The bullies continue with their inappropriate behavior unchallenged. Then, the administration appears weak because no one spoke up. 70% of incidences go unreported. But it's a cancer eating away at the organization because it's not an organization of trust and respect and kindness. Three more from the Gallup poll. 46% of employees said fear of retaliation was the main reason for not reporting. If I report, what's going to happen? I'm going to be ostracized. I'm going to be harassed for reporting the harassment. Right? Here's why people don't speak out. Fear of job loss, the rumor mill, not being believed, being wrong, rejected from coworkers, there's the retaliation. Being labeled as a troublemaker, a feminist, overly sensitive, mentally unstable, not having a sense of humor. Do you ever see these things happen? Not necessarily in your organization. I see these things happen. 90%, because this is ethics. This is all about ethics. Doing the right thing. 90% of the ethical problems we face, we know what we should do. I didn't say 100% because of that gray area. 90% of the time, we know what we should do. The real question is, are we willing to do the right thing when it is likely to cost more than we want to pay? Will I stand up? Will I bring something that is not right to light, knowing that I might be ostracized, knowing that I might be harassed myself? Will I stand up and do the right thing because it is the right thing? Even when it is that person who is admired, even when it is that person who is in a position of leadership, will I still stand up and do what is right?
And we gotta ask ourselves that. Managers, supervisors' responsibility, obviously. You gotta communicate these policies. And obviously, we're talking about it here today, but everybody has got to communicate these policies, and it can't be just talked about once a year or once every 2 years. We gotta talk about the fact that this is what we stand for at Troup County. This is how we behave as an organization. And it doesn't mean it has to be a daily topic of conversation, but it has to be talked about on a regular basis. As a leader, for those of you who are in positions of leadership, you set the standard. Be a role model. Be a role model for being that person who is creating this culture of kindness and respect. Set high standards on your team. This is how we behave. This is how we will treat one another. Again, educate people. Be informed yourself. Enforce the established guidelines. Enforce. Here again. Here's what you say you will do as a county. Make sure you're aware of that and enforce the guidelines. And then be observant. Pay attention. Be aware. Be responsive. Right? This is what you were talking about a minute ago, that I'm saying that the gentleman that I'm working with, his leader is not being responsive at all. Be responsive to both reports and possible retaliation. And make it clear that you will not stand for it. So certainly leaders and managers have a responsibility, but really, it's everyone's responsibility within an organization. It's not just the leaders, it's not just the managers, it's not just the supervisors, although you play a significant role if you're in one of those roles. Everybody has a responsibility to create this culture. Pay attention. Everybody. Pay attention. Educate yourself. Ask yourself those questions before you behave. Think before you act. Don't be impulsive. And then, of course, be courageous. Be courageous enough to stand up. Be courageous enough to do the right thing. And that takes courage, because many times the right thing is not the popular thing. And if I'm going against the conventional wisdom, I am going to... Albert Einstein has a wonderful quote. Great spirits always encounter violent opposition from mediocre minds. Great spirits, people who stand up and do the right thing. Throughout history, there have been famous great spirits. Abraham Lincoln, John Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr. Great spirits. They stood up for what was right. Even though it was not the conventional wisdom at the time, even though it was not what was thought to be right. They stood up and they said, this is not right. It doesn't matter that we've considered it right for so long. It's not right. So Einstein said there have been these great spirits in history, but understand, great spirits will be violently opposed by mediocre minds. All three of those gentlemen, they happen to be gentlemen, there have been women of course, but all three of those gentlemen were so violently opposed that they were what? They were assassinated. They were killed for their beliefs. They were standing up for what is right. Anyone can be a great spirit, is Einstein's definition. Anyone can be a great spirit on a daily basis when you have the courage to stand up for what is right. But understand, so often when you stand up for what is right, you're going to be violently opposed by the mediocre minds. You're going to be opposed by the crowd. You're going to be opposed by the, it's just a joke, man, where's your sense of humor? You got to be courageous to create the culture of kindness and respect that you want here. Okay? 1 hour. 1 hour. Wasn't so bad, was it?